Did you know that 1 in 6 people kill every plant they grow? And it's not because they're part of a massive conspiracy to kill plants. It's because they don't know the most crucial part of how to keep a plant alive. Recently, I was called and interviewed by NPR to be a part of their radio program on this very topic. Did you have that outside?
I did. While talking over Zoom, Valentino checked for a few indicators.
And that's what inspired us to make this video. So today I'm going to teach you the most crucial steps to keep a plant alive and happy, whether it's inside or outside. You put your plant in what you think is the perfect spot in your house, and then it suffers. Things don't go well. Here's what you need to do in order to optimize the exposure. So these improper exposure issues manifest themselves in different ways depending on if it's too little sun or too much sun. You can recognize scorched leaves from sun. Usually happens in the summer when it's the hottest. Then you have the other side of exposure problems where not enough sun, not enough light. Usually you just see kind of a dormant plant. Doesn't do much. If it's supposed to bloom, it doesn't bloom. If it's supposed to have some vibrantly colored leaves, it doesn't have vibrantly colored leaves. With an indoor plant, you could move it. With an outdoor plant, you can also move it, but it's more work and you have to dig it up and find a better spot for it. But in either case, the plant can be moved. If it's an outside plant and the exposure is a problem because of a big building or something, then there's no other option. If exposure is a problem because of a tree or a big hedge or something, you can do some pruning and let in light. For exposure problems, they can't really be determined that it's a problem for 2 to 3 months because you need to give the plant a chance to acclimate and perform. Usually after a week or two, if it's exposure, you're going to see nothing. There's not many problems that can be created in a week or two. So let's say you're watching this video and you look at your soil and you see this desert-looking mess. Don't panic. There's ways to fix that. The most important first step is to infuse them with life. And many times that will mitigate the problems with micronutrients and macronutrients. Most likely our soils aren't necessarily bad. They're all different. You know, some are sandy, some are clay, some are alkaline, some are acid, but most aren't as full of beneficial soil life as we would like. Bacteria, fungi, protozoa, good nematodes, so in other words, complex life. The whole idea of life in the soil is we can create soil or improve soil to a degree that it can create its own macronutrients and its own micronutrients. And that's why I'm not a big believer in saying, I tested my soil and I'm a little low in boron, so I'm gonna go get some boron and put it in my soil. I'd much rather try to build my soil full of life, and then you're gonna have a soil that becomes balanced. In order to improve life in your soil, outdoor products like a good compost tea, our Maximize, Optimize, Nourish Biosol, our Penetrate Liquid Biotiller, those are all products that are part of a system that build soil life, do it easily and conveniently. Inside, you can still use some of the same products. Our Optimize Plus is good, and things like earthworm castings can be used, and even a little bit of compost, or if you have a compost tea. One thing that I do that I think is very helpful in building a little bit of life in my indoor potting soil is every time I water, I use a little bit of Penetrate Liquid Biotiller, which has kelp, saponin, humic acid, and all of those things are really good even for indoor plants. If you subscribe to our channel, your plants will no longer struggle. They will thrive. So let's say you do everything right in terms of your soil and it's lively. There's still ways that you can not be successful in growing a healthy plant, and one of those is improper planting. So here's how you can ensure that you plant your plant properly. The most common improper planting that is really bad for plants, with the exception of tomatoes, is when they're buried too deeply. Optimal height is whatever the stem and top of root ball height is when you buy the plant from the nursery, or if you're transplanting it. Keep that, and maybe even plant that 1/2 inch or 1 inch higher than the finished grade. and that when you put mulch around it, you don't mulch real high up around the stem. Burying it too deeply is a common problem that we see when we go back and try to do a post-mortem on dead plants. Sometimes that's not because the person did that upon planting, but they dug a very large hole and then they settled. Sometimes you'll see, if you look at instructions on how to plant plants, is to dig the hole and backfill it and then fill it with water for a week or two before you plant the plants to let everything settle. Not bad advice. We want to figure out a way to plant plants where they stay just a little bit high above the surrounding grade, and that way water can fall off of the stem or the trunk and not congregate around the base of the plant. Another problem, which isn't as common, is the plant could completely fall apart. The roots just come apart and the soil fall apart because of desiccation, because we lost too many roots. You could have a plant die. And you can have the opposite problem where a plant has been in a container too long and there's circling roots, growing around each other, and there's not a lot of soil in there. It's like a pot-bound plant. You don't recognize that, and you don't, in the process of planting it, kind of separate the roots and encourage it to root out into the native soil. That can also cause a problem, but it wouldn't be a real fast death. That would usually take a while for the roots to continue to circle around each other and basically strangle itself. You can usually tell by performance when you're talking about indoor plants if they're starting to be root bound. It'll look like they need fertilizer if they're root bound, because there's not much soil left because the roots have taken all the capacity of the pot. We're moving along here in a way that you're not going to kill your plant, but there still is another thing that you have to be very careful about, and that's proper or improper watering. Here's how you know that you water properly. One of the difficulties in watering is how you tell if they're overwatered or underwatered are similar in terms of how it looks. So you have to be digging into the soil and feeling it, and if you have, some people use moisture meters, if you have something like that, you try to determine, well, what's the likelihood here based on what I'm seeing in the soil? What kind of soil environment is it in? If it's in a very light soil, then I would suspect first underwatering. If it's in a very heavy soil, clay-like soil, I would first suspect overwatering. I'd say lots of potted plants die from overwatering. My own indoor plants, it's surprising how little I water them, not even once a month, but I have a lot of big pots. With potted plants, it's important that the pot drain. It's best to have a drainage hole that water goes right through. Frequently, people send us emails wanting me to tell them how much to water. It's a difficult thing to say. They're probably going to be able to determine that better than me because they can watch the plant. They know what kind of soil they have. They have a certain kind of irrigation system, or maybe they water by hand. And those variables are impossible for me to know. It's mostly trying to water as little as possible and watching them carefully and see how they respond, and then looking for signs that they're underwatered, and then, kind of going from there. Everything's going great, and then you see a problem, a yellow or brown leaf or a pest, and you think, I can solve that easily. I'm going to spray it with a chemical. Hold on, I don't recommend that, and here's why. With chemical fertilizer or chemicals to fight pest and disease, these are one of the most common ways that plants are damaged. Maybe the instructions aren't followed carefully or understood completely. Outside, if you have a lot of hot weather and without water, these chemicals can be very toxic. So our recommendation is to use organic products. If you have some bug or something on your plants outside or even inside, the first step is to just wash them off with water. We want to start with the least toxic things, and we would almost never recommend a chemical. There's lots of organic ways to address pest and disease. Back to healthy soil, that will make it so you don't get pest and disease, or very rarely do. It's incredible the natural mechanisms that soil have if it's healthy soil. They can do all kinds of incredible things, including making its own natural pesticide in a way that's all done underneath our feet without us having to apply anything. Sometimes gardening, or successful gardening, is a little mysterious. Let's say you've done everything right in your soil, your watering, your planting techniques, everything's perfect, and yet it's still not thriving or blooming like you want it to. There could still be one more factor. Outside of all of these things we've just talked about, what we might call environmental stressors, maybe you're in the wrong zone, your highs and lows aren't proper, or the humidity in your house is improper, or you could be just too hard-headed like me and try to grow black bamboo inside, and it just needs to be outside in order to thrive. My wife keeps telling me it's dead, but it's not dead, it's just severely underperforming. If I just came and I saw this plant look like this, I'd first check the soil and try to determine what watering regimen was being used. I happen to know it's properly moist, it's been properly watered. It's also good soil because I put it in, and I have infused it with life and a little bit of fertility. And also I have it in about as light a place as I can find in my house. Now I also know, because I'm the one that planted it, that black bamboo don't really grow inside. This one I'm attributing to the fact that it needs to be outside, and I'm going to bring in another outside plant, and I think it's got a better chance of making it. It's actually a type of holly. If you'd like to follow along and see if I can have success planting an outdoor plant inside, please subscribe to our channel. In order to get this out, squeeze the pot to loosen it and allow everything to release. We'll pull it right out of there. As you can see, this is not root bound. It has some roots at the bottom, which will just loosen up a little. Very healthy looking roots. They should usually be not a real dark color and not real big, and you should have a lot of small, what looks like new roots. I like this black gold potting soil. We'll use it to backfill, try to do it without making too big a mess. We don't want to bury this, so if we put this down lower and put the soil up to here, that's bad for almost any plant. We've kind of established where the crown of the plant is and the root ball, and we want to leave that as our highest point, and then we'll put the soil all around it. One thing that I do that I think is very helpful in building a little bit of life in my indoor potting soil is every time I water, I use a little bit of Penetrate Liquid Biotiller, which has kelp, saponin, humic acid, and all of those things are really good even for indoor plants. So then we just soak this in very well. I try to get it everywhere and get it to kind of saturate the soil, and it's very light soil, so it's going to drain. Was there something we left out regarding your struggling plant? If there is, let us know in the comments below. We'll try to help you. Like the video if you found it helpful, and we'll keep making more videos like this if they are helping you.